Hi guys, my name is Arthur, and I'm an entrepreneur. 2 years ago, my co-founders and I set out to create a company with one mission in mind, a mission to save humanity. And we're doing this with underwear. I'll explain in a minute. But first, let's all agree on something. Technology has changed our lives. And today, we couldn't leave our home without our smartphones. We have them with us all day, every day. And whilst we agree that we couldn't picture life without Google, Uber, or Tinder, for some of you, this is also exposing us to a great deal of radiation. And if there is no scientific consensus yet on this topic as to how harmful exactly cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation are, a number of recent studies from top scientific institutions have shown that cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation can increase your risk of developing testicular cancer, as well as raise fertility issues. The Cleveland Clinic, the US leading center on research on male fertility, has shown, for instance, that for men keeping their phone in their pocket for more than 4 hours per day, the impact could be up to 50% reduction in sperm count, a reduction as well in terms of sperm quality and sperm DNA. A number of states, such as California, with the city of Berkeley, or France, have already taken steps in order to warn people about the potential danger of this exposure, as well as limiting the exposure of the youngest of us, which are the more exposed. So obviously, all of this is not really funny. But even knowing this, we keep carrying our cell phone in our pocket. And at my company, we wanted to help men protect their most important assets. And there is a reason we call them family jewels. And so we've created the first high-tech boxes that shield your nuts, if you're a guy, from cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation. So how did we do this? We created a unique and patented technology which effectively blocks 99.9% of cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation. This has been tested and certified in an independent lab. The way this technology works is super easy. You've got exactly the same principle in your microwave. We weaved silver fibers within the cotton of the boxer, creating a sort of Faraday cage and keeping the radiation outside of the boxer. Now, if the physical principle is simple, the hard part was to actually integrate this within the fabric of a boxer without making it, well, uncomfortable or rigid, or basically creating a piece of armor, which would be fairly easy, but not that easy to carry all day long. We managed to get a working prototype end of 2015. And back then, we were developing the product for ourselves. We felt the need for this product, so we were basically building it for us. And obviously, we chat with our friends, right? So we go to our friends and we tell them about the idea, and the reception we got was, hey, Arthur, this is amazing. If you manage to create these, I'll take 3. Well, make it 5 for me. Well, I'll take 10 because my brother will be interested as well. And after a few dozen people who told us that, we were like, okay, well, people are really interested in this product. So should we make it available to the greater public? And so we decided to give the opportunity to our future clients to prepay for the product. And the way we were thinking was, well, if we manage to get enough money to start a full-scale production, then we will launch the product and we will offer it to the greater public. And if not, well, we'll just use the prototypes for ourselves and get on with our lives. We then started this crowdfunding campaign and ended it in January 2016 with over 3 times the amount that was necessary to start a full-scale production. All of this with €0 invested in marketing, and 80% of our now clients not coming from our first circle. So word of mouth proved to have worked, and we were in business. That's great news. But now, the question when you're in business is, how do you promote a product which is anti-something, or radiation-proof in our case, without making it unappealing? Because we're talking about balls cancer here. This is definitely not something that is sexy. And Just like any new revolutionary product, we needed to create awareness around it. Because if you think about the Ford T, the first car in 1920, no one was looking for it, just like no one was looking for anti-radiation boxes back then, because no one knew it existed. So we needed to create awareness around the product and explain as well to some of these people why they would need such a product, right? And the first thing that comes to mind when you're doing something anti-something is to insist on the harmful impact. So basically, to use fear-based marketing. That was exactly what we didn't want to do, for several reasons. The first one is, we don't find that very moral. It's not really ethical to just bank on people's fear in order to sell your product. That's not something we wanted to do, generally speaking. Now, the second reason is we were creating one of the first brands in fashion tech, and we're talking about the different revolutions, biotechnology, et cetera, et cetera. Fashion tech is one of them. And we're one of the first brands to emerge right now on this market. So we wanted people to resonate with the brand. We wanted people to identify with it. And you don't do that when you associate the product with cherry issues, I guess. And the third reason is we were actually evolving on a market on which we had a huge handicap. The market, when we arrived on it, was already crowded with fake products, which were doing exactly the opposite of what they were claiming, and banking on people's fear in order to sell it. And I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Salty cubes that were creating a 3 meters protection dome on which radiation could not get through, or 6 meters if you paid more. That was what we were up against. So fear-based marketing for us was definitely out of the question. And what we did was going exactly the other way around. We decided to use humor in our marketing in order to promote our boxes. This all started with the first pitching competition we did. Back then, we were just starting. We had barely prototypes ready. And we were in a pitching competition that was aiming at sourcing some of the best very early stage startups from the French top universities, or Grande École, and send them to the Silicon Valley in order for them to discover what the American market was like. And the last question of the application was, can you draw your product or your idea? This was what we drew. I know. Believe it or not, we got selected for the finals, so I guess the rest of the application was actually a bit more solid than the drawing. But what's interesting is when we got selected for those finals, we got a call from the director of the pitching event who said, well, I loved the drawing, and if you guys want to do something funny for the pitching finals, well, go ahead, go nuts. So we decided to go nuts. We had been talking about the product for so long, but never showing it, really. And so we decided to go to this pitching event with stripper pants, which looked exactly like those. And at the end of the 15 minutes, we stripped down. So we showed the product. We won the competition, and a few weeks later, we were off with a handful of other promising French startups to San Francisco. And this is where we discovered that the American market had definitely a thing for our product, and where we believed that the American market would be our first and biggest market. And to this day, it proved to be true. And so taking off our pants was definitely worth it. And it became sort of a gimmick, because a few weeks later, we were invited at Google in order to pitch in front of HEC Paris alumni. And that's how we went. This is a very professional attire in which we met people who then became, some of them, our first advisors and investors. But we decided to take it a bit further. In January 2016, which was literally just 2 months after we had started selling the product, we were invited to exhibit the product at CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show, the world's biggest exhibit show about consumer technology. Exhibiting there is an amazing opportunity to launch your brand and to launch your product. And so exhibit we did. Obviously, we went there without any pants on. That definitely drew attention. And when seeing us, journalists were actually canceling their appointments in order to interview us. And we got coverage, a lot of coverage. But getting coverage was not enough for us. We wanted to take it a bit further because escalation is key here, as you got it. And what we did was to challenge the most daring journalists to not only interview us wearing our boxes, but to interview us in our boxes. And so we got journalists from some of the world's top publications, ranging from NBC to BBC, to actually report or interview us wearing boxes. We even got a journalist from The Verge, which is one of the US top technology blog, going on for 2 hours on the opening night, being filmed in the exhibit show. That also got us a bit of exposure. And you have to understand that back then, we're 2 months in. We're a super young startup who just started, and we had virtually no budget. So going to the US, between the flights, the hotels, the exhibit cost, and so on, was definitely a huge bet for us. We banked a big chunk of our cash back then to go there. But this was a bet that we were willing to take based on what we had learned a few months ago in the Silicon Valley. So we went there, and next thing you know, a few days later, we were trending in the top 10 brands of the CES 2018, alongside with small companies that you might have heard of, Samsung, LG, and other smallish companies who were probably spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in visibility. And then there were us, this small startup, 2 months old, just there, trending. That was, so the bet definitely paid off, and we were launched internationally. Our sales took off, and our notoriety as well. When we came back to France, January 2017, so this was right in the middle of the French presidential campaign. So we had to use that, right? And so before and after the campaign, actually, we went to candidates or ministers or just politics in general, and we offered them our boxes. But we didn't want just to offer them boxes, right? So what we did was actually going up to them and saying, Mr. President, to do what you did, it definitely takes some balls. So you have to protect them. Here you go. And we did this with ministers, with presidents, with billion-dollar companies' founders, and usually in front of the news camera. This got us to some of the top news TV events in France. So this drove a bit more exposure as well. So the sales were starting to take off, and we were starting as well to do some communication now, to do some marketing. And obviously, when you started this way, the communication campaign had to have something funny as well in it. You can't go that way and then go the completely other way. So this is the key visual for our 2017 communication campaign. For those of you guys who don't speak perfect English, these are all the synonyms to say balls, followed by our tagline, got some? Protect them. And we tried that in all of our communication campaign, ranging from the internet to exhibit shows and going through billboards in the Paris subway. And the reaction we got all the time was people who stopped, laughed a bit, took a picture, and then posted that on the social networks or sending that to their friends. And the inherent virality of the campaign actually got us to a point in notoriety that would have taken us much more time and money to achieve through traditional ways. And then we used social media as well in order to gain even further exposure from that. I could go on for a bit further than 18 minutes with the different things that we tried, but I want to talk to you about the results just a little bit. So 2 years later, we went from starting in 2016, starting selling in 2017, and now we're beginning in 2018. What happened? Not using fear and using humor instead was definitely a big bet for our startup. That was definitely a big risk. Because with humor, either it works or either it kills you. So 2 years later, we're fortunate enough to have a well-positioned brand that our clients actually compare to the very well-established players on the market, which has been there for hundreds of years. We managed several successful buzz worldwide, and thanks to this, we're now the uncontested leader internationally on our market. So I would say humor paid off in this specific case. That was it, guys. That was the story of how a young startup managed to capture 95% of its market in less than 2 years. So think about it, and think about how you can use humor in your marketing, because it can save you years on your revolution. And since I've been talking so much about the product, nah, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much.